They tell you in training that death is the only certainty a guardsman can expect. They tell you to embrace it, to welcome the Emperor's peace when it comes. They show you picked captures of the Xenos, the greenskins, the Orks, hulking brutes with crude weapons and cruder minds. They tell you they're animals, savages, nothing more than beasts that can pull a trigger. They tell you a lot of things in training, and most of it is lies designed to keep you standing when the shells start falling. But the biggest lie, the one that haunts me now in this darkness that smells of fungus and old blood, is that death is the worst thing that can happen to you. I learned the truth when they took me alive. My name is Corporal Hector, service number 447 Theta 9271, 3rd Platoon, Kolvax 88th Infantry Regiment. I was 23 standard years old when my world ended, though I suppose that number doesn't mean much anymore. Time moves differently here. In the belly of their war camps, measured not in hours or days but in beatings, in meals of unidentifiable slop, in the gradual erosion of everything that made me human. I tell myself I'm still Corporal Hector. I whisper my service number in the dark when I think they can't hear me. But words are just sounds, and sounds fade, and I'm not entirely certain anymore if the man who wore that name and number still exists inside this body that has learned to flinch and grovel and survive. The taking happened on Vardis Prime, a nothing world on the eastern fringe, all grey rock and alkaline dust. We'd been dug in for 6 weeks, holding a communications relay against what Command called a minor greenskin incursion. Minor. 3,000 orcs is minor when you're commanding from orbit, when you're in the trenches, when the ground shakes with their approach, and the air fills with their bestial roaring. 3,000 might as well be 3 million. The attack came at dawn. They always attack at dawn, as if they figured out that's when human eyes struggle most against the light. I remember the sound first, that ocean wave roar of WAAGHE that hits you before you see anything. A wall of noise that makes your bones vibrate and your bladder clench. I was on the eastern parapet when the shells started falling. Crude rockets that spun and wobbled but still found their marks with ugly regularity. Private Kess was next to me, 17 years old, voxing coordinates to the mortar teams when something hit the sandbags below us. The blast lifted us both, turned the world into spinning fragments of dirt and sky and pain. I came down hard on the wrong side of the trench, in the kill zone, and when my vision cleared I saw Kess in pieces scattered across 10 meters of rock. The Orks were already through the wire, green tides of muscle and metal and fungal stench, and I remember thinking with perfect clarity, this is where I die. But I didn't die. A shell fragment had torn through my left thigh, and I couldn't stand, could barely crawl. I dragged myself behind a crater rim and tried to bring my Lazarifal up, but my hands weren't working right. Shock, probably, or blood loss, or the simple animal terror that was eating through my training like acid through steel. The line broke. I heard it rather than saw it, the vox chatter dissolving into screams and static, the disciplined volleys of lasfire becoming scattered pops, and then silence. The Orks swept over the position like a green tsunami, and I pressed myself flat in the crater, covered in dust and Kess's blood, and prayed to the Emperor that they wouldn't notice me. They noticed me. The first one was a brute nearly 3 meters tall, all slab muscle and tusks, and that particular reek that all Orks carry like rotting vegetation mixed with engine oil and something sharper, something chemical that burns the inside of your nose. It stood over my crater, silhouetted against the morning sun, and I knew it could see me. I raised my rifle. The power pack was dead. The Ork made a sound, a wet chuffing that might have been laughter, and reached down with a hand the size of my torso. I remember screaming, trying to push myself backward through solid rock, my broken leg dragging uselessly. The hand closed around my webbing and lifted, and the world became pain and sky and the face of the greenskin, so close I could see the fungal growths in its skin, the yellowed fangs, the small black eyes that held something that might have been curiosity. It didn't kill me. That was the first moment I realized something was wrong, that the script I'd been given wasn't playing out correctly. Orks kill. That's what they do. They live for violence, for the joy of destruction. But this one tucked me under its arm like a sack of rations and carried me away from the relay station, away from the bodies of my platoon, into the dust wastes where their war machines waited. I screamed until my throat bled. I fought until my unbroken leg gave out from exhaustion. The orc ignored me completely, and that was somehow worse than any beating could have been. The sheer insignificance of my resistance, the knowledge that my struggles were so beneath notice that it didn't even bother to acknowledge them. They had a camp 15 kilometers south, in a canyon system that had hidden their numbers from our augurs. Crude structures of scrap metal and fungus leather. Smoke rising from forges where they beat weapons into shape with hammers and enthusiasm rather than precision. There were vehicles everywhere, tracks and bikes, and trucks held together with wire and faith, and orcish engineering that made a mockery of physics. And there were prisoners. Emperor, help me. There were so many prisoners. They threw me in a pen with 20 others, guardsmen mostly, a few civilian refugees who'd been caught in the sweep. The pen was just a ring of scrap metal buried in the ground, open to the sky. No roof, no shelter, just dirt and other bodies, and the smell. That smell, I still wake up tasting it, even now, even after everything. Unwashed bodies, yes, but also fear, sweat, and old blood, and human waste, and something underneath it all, something that came from the orcs themselves, that fungal rot that gets into your lungs and never really leaves. A man with sergeant's stripes and empty eyes told me his name was Tauren, that he'd been here for 3 weeks, that I should save my strength and stop trying to dig under the walls, because they always caught you, and when they caught you, they made sure everyone could see what happened next. I didn't believe him. Not then. I thought if I just waited for the right moment, if I stayed alert and strong and ready, I could escape. I thought rescue would come. The Kolvax 88th was a proud regiment, well supplied, well connected. Someone would notice we'd gone silent. Someone would send a relief force. I clung to that belief like a prayer. And every morning when I woke with the twin suns beating down on my face and my leg throbbing and the orcs already starting their daily roaring, I told myself, today the ships will come. Today I'll see Imperial Navy fighters streaking across the sky, hear the thunder of orbital bombardment, watch these animals burn for what they've done. The ships never came. The routine established itself with brutal simplicity. Morning was feeding time buckets of something that might have been meat, might have been fungus, might have been something neither animal nor vegetable but uniquely orcish, thrown into the pen while we scrambled and fought for shares like animals ourselves. There was never enough. There was never going to be enough. The orcs thought hunger was funny, would stand around the pen making their barking laughs while we degraded ourselves over scraps. Afternoon was work time. They'd pull prisoners out in groups, drag us to their forges or their vehicle yards, put tools in our hands, and beat us if we didn't perform. I learned to weld scrap metal. I learned to haul ammunition. I learned to keep my eyes down and my mouth shut and my movements quick, because slowness attracted attention and attention meant pain. Sergeant Tauren taught me the rules, the ones you only learn by watching people break them and die. Don't look the orcs in the eyes, they take it as a challenge. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't try to run. They think chasing is sport, and they always catch you, and what happens after is a lesson for everyone else. Don't refuse food, no matter what it looks like. Don't show weakness, but don't show strength either, because both get you noticed. Don't help other prisoners too obviously. Generosity is suspicious. Don't keep anything hidden. They search randomly, and finding contraband means you get made an example. Don't ask questions about escape. Don't talk about rescue. Don't remember your life before. Don't think about afterward. Just survive. Hour by hour, moment to moment. Reduce yourself to the animal basics of breath and heartbeat, and the space between beatings. I lasted 2 weeks before I tried to run anyway. It happened in the vehicle yards, where they had me helping load shells into a truck that leaked radiation badly enough to make my teeth ache. The orc supervising us got distracted by a fight between two of his fellows, that wonderful orcish tendency to solve disputes through immediate violence. I saw my chance. The canyon wall was close, riddled with crevices and caves. I could hide there, I thought. Wait until dark. Work my way back toward Imperial lines. I still believed in Imperial lines. I still believed in rescue. I was still so incredibly stupid. I made it 40 meters before they brought me down. Not the supervisor, but two younglings, smaller orcs barely 2 meters tall, who ran me to ground like dogs after a rabbit. The smaller one pinned me to the dirt with a boot on my spine while the larger one made that chuffing laugh sound. And I knew with perfect cold certainty that I'd made a terminal mistake. They dragged me back to the vehicle yard, while the other prisoners watched with Tauren's same empty eyes. The eyes that said, "I told you so," without speaking. The supervisor, a massive beast with a mechanical jaw and burned scars across half its face, looked at me with something that might have been disappointment. Then it broke 3 of my fingers, one at a time, slowly, while holding me up so everyone could see and hear. The pain was a white wall that erased thought. I heard screaming that didn't sound human, and only slowly realized it was coming from my own throat. When it finished, it tossed me back in the pen like a sack of spoiled meat, and the other prisoners shuffled away from me, not out of cruelty but out of that same pragmatic wisdom that Tauren embodied. Don't get close to the one they're watching. Don't associate yourself with failure. Stay invisible. My hand swelled overnight, black and purple and hot, the fingers at angles that made my stomach heave. Tauren waited until morning, then shuffled over while the orcs were busy with their dawn fighting rituals. He didn't say anything, just pulled a strip of metal from his clothing. Emperor knows how long he'd been hiding it, and bound my fingers straight with scraps of cloth, torn from his own shirt. The pain of setting them was worse than the breaking. I bit through my lip and tasted copper, and Tauren's expression never changed. That same emptiness, that same absence of hope or compassion or anything except mechanical function. "You'll work worse now," he said. His voice was dust. "They'll notice. Work worse means no food. No food means you get weaker. Weaker means you're useless. Useless means they feed you to their squigs or use you for target practice or just let you die in the pen. That's how it goes." I wanted to ask him why he'd helped me then, if I was already dead. But I knew the answer. It was the same reason I hadn't completely given up. Not yet. Some ghost of humanity still rattling around inside the animal we'd become, going through the motions of human compassion because the alternative was admitting we'd already stopped being men. The hand healed wrong, but it healed. 6 weeks became 8, became 10. The suns wheeled overhead. The orcs fought each other constantly, settling disputes through violence that ranged from simple punching contests to full melees with blades and guns. We learned to duck when the shooting started, to not react when an orc fell and didn't get up, to understand that their hierarchy was built on combat and the strongest ruled until someone stronger came along. We learned their rough language, not fluently but enough git for prisoner, work for anything that wasn't fighting, daka for guns, chopper for blades. We learned to recognize individuals. The big one with the mechanical jaw was Boss Grimtooth, the camp commander. The one with the checkerboard paint on his armor was a mech, their version of a tech priest, obsessed with building bigger guns. The pack of younglings were called youths, and they were the cruelest because they had everything to prove. We learned, and learning meant surviving, and surviving meant changing. I watched it happen to others first. A man named Jex, who'd been a PDF lieutenant, started laughing at the orcs' jokes, that barking aggressive humor. He'd flinch less, move more like they did, square his shoulders when challenged. The orcs noticed. They liked it. They gave him better food, made him a work leader, let him hit other prisoners to keep them in line. Jex became something neither human nor orc but occupying a space between. His eyes still empty like Tauren's but with something new underneath, a kind of desperate hunger for approval from his captors. I swore I'd never become that. I swore it every night, lying in the dirt with my broken hand aching and my empty stomach cramping and the sounds of orc industry filling the darkness. I was Corporal Hectorus, service number 447 Theta 9271, Kolvax 88th Infantry Regiment. I had a mother on Kolvax Prime, worked in a textile factory. A sister, younger, named Mera. A lieutenant I'd respected, called us his finest squad. I had an identity, a history, a self that existed independent of this place. But memory is a thing that needs feeding, and we were so hungry. When you're hungry enough, you stop remembering what real food tastes like. You eat what's put in front of you, and you're grateful. When you're tired enough, you stop dreaming. When you're afraid enough, you stop thinking past the next moment. And when the next moment comes, and the moment after that, and none of them bring rescue or death, or any kind of ending at all, just the same routine of brutality and degradation day after day after day, something starts to wear away. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just a slow erosion, like wind on stone, until you look down one day and realize there's less of you than there used to be. 3 months in, they brought fresh prisoners, a whole new batch, from some other failed defensive action, wide-eyed and terrified, and still believing rescue would come. I watched them go through the same process. I had the desperate plans, the hidden defiance, the first punishment, the slow learning of the rules. I watched and felt nothing. Not sympathy, not kinship, not even satisfaction at no longer being the newest. Just a kind of dull recognition, the way you might recognize weather patterns or the cycle of seasons. This is what happens. This is what we are now. One of the new ones, a young man with corporal stripes and Acadian accent, tried to organize a resistance. Whispered conversations in the pen after dark, talk of weapons, caches, and coordinated uprising, and overwhelming our captors through numbers. The old prisoners, Torin and myself and the others who'd survived past the first months, we just watched. We didn't try to stop him. We didn't warn him. We knew what was coming, and part of us, the part that wasn't quite dead yet, wanted to see if maybe this time would be different. If fresh blood and fresh courage could succeed where we'd failed. The Orks caught him, of course. Not through any betrayal. We'd all learned not to talk where they could hear. They caught him because Orks aren't stupid, no matter what the training hollows say. They're brutal and crude, yes, but they understand violence with a sophistication that puts our military academies to shame. They know rebellion. They encourage it, in a way, because it gives them opportunities to establish dominance, to remind us and themselves of the natural order. Boss Grimtooth had the Cadian brought to the center of the camp, made us all watch while he explained in broken Gothic about little gits thinking they's tough, and how tough gits get crumped. Then he beat the Cadian to death with his bare hands, slowly, making sure we all saw, making sure we all understood. The body stayed there for 2 days. No one was allowed to move it. The Orks didn't care about disease or rot. The body was a sign, a lesson written in meat. The new prisoners got the message. The whispering stopped. Fresh courage broke against Orkish reality and became the same exhausted compliance that the rest of us had achieved. The Cadian's corporal stripes faded under the twin suns, and we went back to work, and the routine continued. And somewhere in that continuation I realized I'd stopped whispering my service number at night. When had that stopped? I couldn't remember. The absence bothered me less than I thought it should. 4 months. 5. The seasons changed. Vardis Prime had shallow seasons, just slightly less hot and slightly more hot, but you could tell by the angle of the suns and the depth of the shadows. No rescue came. No Imperial Navy, no relief force, no orbital bombardment. The truth settled into my bones like cold. No one was coming. The Imperium had written off Vardis Prime, or the war had moved on, or the communications relay we'd died for hadn't been important enough to justify the resources for retrieval. We were a rounding error in the ledgers of a galaxy-spanning war machine. We'd been filed under acceptable losses and forgotten. That realization should have broken me. Instead, it felt like something unlocking. If no one was coming, if there was no rescue to wait for, then all that remained was survival. And survival meant adaptation, meant learning, meant becoming something that could exist in this environment the way you'd adapt to thin air or high gravity or toxic atmosphere. The question wasn't how to stay human anymore. The question was how to stay alive. The Orks, I started to notice, lived by a logic that was actually quite simple once you stripped away the layers of human expectation. They respected strength. They valued function. If you could work, if you could produce, if you demonstrated usefulness, they kept you alive. If you broke, they disposed of you. No malice in it, no more than you'd feel malice toward a broken tool. Just pragmatism. We were resources, and like all resources, we had value only insofar as we functioned. Accept that. Internalize it. And survival became a matter of simple mathematics. Maximize function. Minimize visibility. Endure. I started working harder. Not obviously that would attract the wrong kind of attention, but consistently. I learned to anticipate what the Orc overseers wanted before they had to shout for it. I learned their crude welding techniques, adapted to their tools, figured out how to make repairs that would hold. My broken hand had healed into a claw, 3 fingers permanently bent, but I developed compensating grips, ways to work around the disability. The Orcs noticed. Not with praise, they didn't praise, but with a kind of grudging acceptance. The beatings became less frequent. My food portions stayed more consistent. I wasn't special, wasn't elevated like Jex had been, but I'd achieved something more valuable. I'd become reliable, unremarkable, but functional, a tool that didn't break. Tauren noticed too. He watched me with those empty eyes during the night, when we'd lie in the pen and pretend to sleep. "You're learning," he said once, his voice barely a whisper. Not approval, not condemnation, just observation. "Learning what?" I asked. "How to stop fighting it." I wanted to argue, to insist I was still fighting, still resisting in whatever small ways I could. But we both knew it would be a lie. I wasn't fighting. I was adapting. And adaptation meant accepting the environment, working within it rather than against it, letting it shape you into a form that could survive. The human part of me, the part that remembered being Corporal Hectorus, whispered that this was defeat, that compliance was collaboration, that every day I worked for them I betrayed every guardsman who died at the relay station. But the growing part of me, the part that had learned to flinch correctly and grovel efficiently and eat spoiled meat without vomiting, that part whispered something different. "You're alive. Kess is dead. Your lieutenant is dead. Your platoon is gone. Your regiment has moved on or been destroyed. But you're alive. That has to count for something. That has to be worth something. Doesn't it?" 6 months. The camp had grown more prisoners from other raids, more vehicles, more forges. Boss Grimtooth's warband was getting stronger, preparing for something big. You could feel it in the energy, the increased activity, the way the Orcs fought each other with more enthusiasm than usual. War was coming. Real war, not raids. And we prisoners would be coming too, in whatever capacity they needed. Some as labor, some as shields, some, maybe, as soldiers, if we could be trusted with weapons and pointed in the right direction. Jex was already being groomed for that. He had a shooter now, a crude Orc gun that jammed every 3rd shot but still worked better than our lasguns had. He carried it openly, wore it like an honor. The Orcs called him Da Humi Git What Knows How to Fight, which was apparently a compliment in their language. He led work crews, barked orders in broken Orcish, and when prisoners moved too slowly he'd hit them himself, saving the Orcs the trouble. He ate better than any of us, slept in a shed instead of the pen, had boots, real boots, scavenged from some other battlefield. I watched him and tried to feel disgust, but mostly I felt envy. He'd found a path to something better than lying in dirt. He'd made himself valuable in a way that earned rewards. The human in me said he'd betrayed his species, collaborated with Xenos, violated every oath he'd ever sworn. But the part of me that was learning to survive in this place whispered, "He's smarter than you. He's understood what you're only beginning to grasp. The Imperium abandoned you, but the Orks will keep you alive as long as you're useful. Why not be useful in comfort rather than in misery? I started paying more attention during work details. Started volunteering for harder jobs, ones that brought me into more contact with the Ork mechs. Started learning not just how to follow orders but how to anticipate them, how to make myself the prisoner they reached for when they needed something done right. It wasn't collaboration, I told myself. It was survival. Playing the game I'd been forced into. Doing what was necessary. The rationalizations came easier every day. Then came the night I laughed at an Ork joke. It wasn't even a good joke, some crude bit about a grot getting crushed by a falling beam. The Ork telling it. A mech named Zagrat slapped his knee and made that chuffing sound. And before I could stop myself, I'd mimicked it. That same barking laugh. Zagrat noticed, his small black eyes fixed on me, and for a heartbeat I thought I'd made a fatal error. Crossed some line I didn't know existed. Then he laughed harder, reached over with a hand that could crush my skull, and slapped my shoulder with what was probably meant to be camaraderie, but felt like being hit with a hammer. "Dis git gets it," he announced to the other mechs. "Smart git. Dis one. Not like da other humies what just stands there." I got extra food that night. A piece of something that might have been roasted squig, still warm. I ate it, and it was the best thing I'd tasted in 6 months, and I hated myself for how good it felt. Toran watched from across the pen, his empty eyes reflecting firelight from the forges. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. We both knew what was happening, what I was becoming. 7 months. 8. The days blurred together, marked only by the slow accumulation of changes. My hands were permanently stained with grease and metal dust. My back had developed a slouch from too much hauling. My legs had strengthened from constant work, but my arms had thinned from never quite enough food. I'd lost teeth to scurvy and poor nutrition. My hair had grown long and matted, turned grey at the temples though I was only 24. I smelled like them now, like fungus and oil, the human stink worn away by immersion in their world. When I caught my reflection in polished metal, I didn't entirely recognize the face looking back. The new prisoners still had that fresh-caught look, that desperate defiance. They reminded me of something, though it took me weeks to figure out what they reminded me of who I used to be. The realization came with a strange doubling, like looking at yourself from outside. I'd been that person once, Corporal Hector, who believed in rescue and refused to give up and swore he'd never collaborate. That person seemed impossibly distant now, separated not just by months but by a gulf of experience that had reshaped everything. If I met him now, that earlier self, what would I say? Would I warn him? Tell him to die clean rather than live like this? Or would I tell him the truth, that survival requires compromise, that dignity is a luxury you can't afford when you're this hungry, that the human soul is more flexible than the ecclesiarchy would have you believe? I didn't know. And the not knowing bothered me less than it should have. The war, when it came suddenly. Boss Grimtov's scouts reported an Imperial convoy, supplies moving between fortress points, defended but vulnerable. The whole camp mobilized, every truck loaded with Orks, every gun checked and rechecked with enthusiasm that made a mockery of proper maintenance, every warrior painted and ready, and roaring their eagerness. And the prisoners were given a choice, communicated through Jex, who'd become their primary translator. Come with us as workers, help loot the convoy, get better food and better treatment, or stay in the pen and wait, and hope the camp didn't get attacked while the main force was gone. Most chose to come. I chose to come. The alternative was passive death from starvation or exposure or some other stupid cause. At least with the convoy raid I'd be doing something, moving, acting. Maybe I'd see Imperial forces again. Maybe I'd find a way to signal them, to escape in the chaos. Maybe I was lying to myself about my motives. Probably. They loaded us into the back of a truck, 30 prisoners packed like rations. Jex rode up front with the Ork driver, his shooter across his lap. The convoy was a day's drive across the alkaline wastes, and the truck had no suspension worth mentioning, and by the time we arrived, my kidneys felt like they'd been beaten with clubs. But we arrived, and the Orks deployed with more coordination than I'd expected, flanking elements, suppressing fire, a frontal assault that used their speed and aggression to overwhelm defensive positions. It was crude compared to Imperial tactics, but it worked. The convoy never had a chance. I watched Orks tear through Chimera transports like opening ration tins, watched them overwhelm guard positions through sheer momentum and mass, watched guardsmen, my people, my species, soldiers who might have trained in the same scolum I did get cut down by crude choppers and even cruder shooters, and I felt nothing. Not joy at seeing Orks win, but not sorrow either. Just a kind of numb acceptance. This is what happens. This is how it goes. One side wins, one side loses, and you do what you must to be on the winning side, because the losing side doesn't survive. When the shooting stopped, they put us to work looting ammunition, food, medical supplies, anything useful. I found myself rifling through a destroyed Chimera, pulling out crates of rations that still had the Departamento Munitorum stamps on them. Rations I would have been eating if things had gone differently, if the relay station had held, if I'd died clean instead of living dirty. I loaded them onto an Ork truck, and Zagrat slapped my back again, that same crushing camaraderie, and I understood that I'd passed some test. I wasn't just useful, I was trusted. In the Ork hierarchy, where everything was about function and strength and reliability, I'd proven myself. I was becoming something they could depend on. The other prisoners saw it too. They'd started treating me differently. Not quite like Jex, but moving in that direction. They'd defer when I was around, look to me for cues about how to behave. Without planning it, without choosing it, I'd become a leader of sorts. A bridge between the human prisoners and the Ork overseers. The kind of person who could translate demands and smooth interactions and make sure the work got done without anyone getting killed. A collaborator, a capo, a survivor. The word traitor crossed my mind less and less. Or maybe I'd just gotten better at not listening when it did. 9 months. 10. The war effort intensified. Boss Grimtoof's warband merged with a larger force, an entire WAAGHE moving across the sector. The camp became a staging ground for something immense. Thousands of Orks and their war machines, all pointed towards some objective I didn't understand and didn't need to. We prisoners, the ones who'd survived, who'd adapted, who'd learned how to be useful, we were integrated into the war machine, not as soldiers, not quite, but as essential support, working the forges, maintaining the vehicles, loading ammunition, the labor that kept the WAAGHA running. I was good at it. That was the thing I could no longer deny. I was good at working for them. My broken hand had strengthened in its new configuration. I'd learned to read the moods of individual Orks, to know when Zagrat wanted initiative, and when Boss Grimtoof wanted immediate obedience. I'd learned enough of their language to communicate complex technical concepts. I'd learned to move like they did, with that same forward-leaning aggression, that same confidence in purpose. Not human movement anymore, but not quite Orkish either. Something in between. Torin died in the 10th month. Just stopped moving one morning, his body finally giving out after too many months of poor food and hard labor. The Orks threw him in a pit with other waste. No ceremony, no acknowledgement. He'd been a sergeant once, had led men in battle, had probably had a family and a home and dreams. None of it mattered. He was gone, and the work continued, and by evening I'd forgotten to think about him at all. That absence of grief, that sheer emptiness where human emotion should have been, scared me more than any Ork ever had. When had I stopped being capable of mourning? When had other humans become so disposable that their deaths didn't even register? The answer, I knew but didn't want to acknowledge, was that they'd always been disposable. The Imperium had taught me that, long before the Orks. Every guardsman knows he's expendable. Every soldier understands that the mission matters more than any individual life. The Orks were just more honest about it, less interested in dressing up pragmatism in propaganda about duty and honor and the emperor's will. They needed workers, so they kept workers alive. When workers broke, they got new ones. Simple, direct, efficient. Maybe I'd been learning the wrong lessons my whole life. Maybe the Imperium's hypocrisy was the real betrayal, not my adaptation to reality. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, it felt like relief, like setting down a weight I'd been carrying for too long. If the Imperium had no special claim on my loyalty, if it had abandoned me as thoroughly as I'd abandoned it, then survival wasn't betrayal. It was just pragmatism, just doing what any creature would do when faced with extinction, living at any cost, adapting to any environment, becoming whatever was necessary to see another dawn. 11 months. A full year approaching. The anniversary of my capture would pass unmarked, uncelebrated, probably unnoticed. I tried to remember what day it was, what the imperial calendar would say. The numbers wouldn't come. Days of the week had no meaning here. Months were just weather patterns. The only calendar that mattered was measured in work assignments and food deliveries, and the slow accumulation of changes in myself that I could no longer pretend weren't happening. Jex had become something extraordinary, full Orc acceptance, a place of honor in their hierarchy. He fought alongside them now, killed for them, roared their battle cries with genuine enthusiasm. When he looked at me, his eyes held something that might have been pity, as if I was the one who hadn't figured it out yet. As if I was still clinging to something that deserved to be discarded. Maybe he was right. He was certainly happier than me, or at least seemed to be. He'd embraced the transformation completely, let go of whatever he'd been before, and found something like peace in the simplicity of Orcish existence. Fight, work, eat, sleep, no complicated morality, no torturous self-examination, just function and survival, and the raw joy of being alive. I envied him. Emperor, help me. I envied him. The breaking point, if there even was a breaking point rather than a gradual dissolution, came during a work detail in the 12th month. We were repairing a battle wagon, Zagrat directing while I welded damaged armor plates. Another prisoner, one of the newer ones who'd been captured maybe 3 months ago, dropped a tool, just a stupid mistake, fatigue and poor grip. The tool fell on a grot's foot. The grot squealed. An Orc overseer looked over, annoyed, and started toward the prisoner with a wrench raised. The prisoner froze, terror written across his face, and I knew what was coming, at minimum a beating, possibly death if the Orc's mood was bad. I stepped between them, no thought, no decision, just automatic movement, body responding to training that had been beaten into me during years of Imperial Guard service. Protect your fellows. Never leave a man behind. The code I'd learned before I learned to tie my boots. But the Orc wasn't an enemy soldier, and the prisoner wasn't my squad mate, and we weren't on the same side anymore. What was I doing? My fault, I said in Orcish, the words clumsy but comprehensible. I didn't teach Git proper. I fix. No problems. The Orc stopped, wrench still raised, and looked at me with those small, calculating eyes. A long moment where my life balanced on a blade edge. Then it lowered the wrench. You fix, Den, it growled, or you gets crumped instead. It walked away. Crisis averted. The prisoner stared at me like I was insane, and maybe I was. What had possessed me to risk myself for some stranger who'd be dead in 3 months anyway? But Zagrat had been watching. After the shift ended, he pulled me aside. "You's gettin' soft," he said, but not angrily, almost thoughtfully. "Carin' about da other gits. Dat's not how it works. You supposed to look out for yourself. Be strongest. Be best. Den you gets to survive." "I know," I said. And I did know. I'd learned the rules. But something in me, some ghost of Corporal Hectorus, had overridden the learning. Had done something selfless and stupid, and pointlessly human. "But," Zagrat continued, and his tone shifted to something I'd never heard from an Orc before, respect. Use also showing you can lead. Can make other gits work better. That's useful. Boss Grimtooth, he's been watching you. Thinks maybe you's ready for more. More work. More. What you call it? Responsibility. Responsibility. They were offering me Jex's position, or something like it. A role with authority, with better conditions, with genuine integration into their hierarchy. All I had to do was accept it. Say yes. Let go of the last shreds of human identity and become something new. A leader of human labor in an orc war machine. A useful tool promoted to supervisor. A traitor who'd climbed high enough that treason became a job title. I should have refused. Should have spat in his face, chosen death with whatever honor I had left. That's what Corporal Hector would have done. That's what the man I'd been a year ago would have demanded. But I wasn't that man anymore. Maybe I'd never really been him at all. Maybe the guard had just painted a veneer of nobility over the same survival instinct that every creature has. And when the veneer wore away, this is what was underneath an animal that wanted to live, whatever the cost. I accept, I said. The words came out steady. No hesitation. No doubt. And Emperor curse me. No regret either. Zagrat's face split in that tusked grin. Knew yous was smart, Hughie. Come on. Boss'll want to hear you say it proper. I followed him toward Boss Grimtoff's command shelter, through the camp where I'd spent 12 months transforming from a soldier into something else. Something I didn't have a name for. Other prisoners watched me pass. Some with hope maybe I'd make their lives better. Some with despair. I was confirmation that no one was coming to save us, that this was permanent. Some, like Jex, with approval. Welcome to the winning side, their eyes said. Welcome to survival. The thought came, sharp and clear and devastating. My platoon is dead. My regiment is gone. The Imperium filed my death certificate months ago. The only people who still know I'm alive are right here, in this camp, and none of them are human anymore. Not really. We're something else now. We've been changed by this place, shaped by these conditions, made into new creatures that can survive where humans can't. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even good. Adaptation is nature's highest virtue. The strong survive by becoming stronger. The smart survive by becoming smarter. And the weak insist on staying human, while the world that gave meaning to humanity abandons them to rot. I wasn't weak. I'd proven that. I'd survived. And now I'd thrive. Boss Grimtove's shelter smelled like gun oil and fungus beer. He sat on a throne made from a chimera hatch, surrounded by lesser orcs who deferred to him with that same violence-based respect I'd learned to recognize. Zagrat explained my promotion in his language, too fast and too full of technical terms for me to follow completely. Boss Grimtooth listened, his mechanical jaw clicking occasionally, those small black eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. So, he said finally, in Gothic that was heavily accented but clear, Da Humigit wants to be more useful, wants to lead da other Humies, make 'em work better, make 'em not die so fast. He leaned forward, and I could smell his breath, like rotting meat and electrical fire. Why? What's you get out of this? The honest answer would have been, better food, better shelter, better chance of survival. But I understood enough of Orkish culture to know that wasn't the right answer. They respected strength, but they also respected enthusiasm, ambition, the desire to be better at what you did, not for some external reward, but for the sheer joy of excellence. They fought because fighting was good. They built because building was good. They followed strong bosses because strength was good. Purpose was its own reward. I want to be the best, I said. Best Humie worker in the WA. Make things that don't break. Fix things that others can't. Lead gits so they work like orcs, work hard and good and strong. The silence stretched. Other orcs watched, waiting to see if Boss Grimtooth would find this acceptable or if he'd crump me for presumption. His mechanical jaw clicked 3 times, then he laughed. That same booming roar that had terrified me a year ago but now just sounded like approval. "Good," he bellowed. "Dat's good. You's got the right idea, Humie. You's understand what it means to be in a WAGAG. It ain't about where you's from. It's about what you's do. You do good work. You get to keep doing it. You lead good. You get to keep leadin'. Simple." He stood, walked over, and that massive hand came down on my shoulder. Not crushing, almost gentle, by his standards. "You's Humie boss now. Da gets in da pen dies yours. Keep 'em workin', keep 'em useful, do dat, and you'll have a place here long as you want it." "Yes, boss," I said. The title came naturally. No irony, no internal resistance. He was the boss. That was just objective fact. "And one more thing," he added, leaning close enough that I could count the fungal growths in his skin. "You's one of us now. Not orc, yeah, but not whatever you was before neither. You's part of da WAGH. And dat means if any humies come, if any of your old friends show up, you's on our side. You fight for us. You don't help them. You's understand." This was the moment. The real choice. Everything before had been preparation, adaptation, survival. This was commitment. This was choosing, actively and consciously, to become what I'd been slowly transforming into all along. The Imperium would call it betrayal. The ecclesiarchy would call it heresy. Every human who'd ever lived would call it unforgivable. But they weren't here. They'd left me here. And the Orks, brutal and crude and violent as they were, at least they were honest. They hadn't promised rescue and failed to deliver. They hadn't wrapped cruelty in rhetoric about duty. They hadn't abandoned me. They'd kept me alive, given me work, given me purpose, given me, in their way, respect. "I understand," I said. "I'm with the WAAGA. Boss Grimtooth's grin widened. "Good, now go. You's got gits to organize. Tomorrow we's movin' out. Big fight comin'. Gonna need every welder, every hauler, every git what can lift and carry. You make sure they are ready." I left the shelter, walked back through the camp as Humie boss. A title and a position and a role that meant something here even if it would mean damnation anywhere else. The prisoners in the pen looked up as I approached, and I saw in their faces the same progression I'd experienced, the new ones still defiant, the older ones already broken, the oldest ones like me, adapted and functional, and no longer sure what they were. "Listen up," I told them, my voice carrying that tone of command I'd learned in the guard and never quite lost. "Tomorrow we move. Big operation. You'll work harder than you've ever worked, but you'll also eat better if you do it right. I'm going to teach you how to do it right, how to survive, how to be useful. It's not what you were, it's not what you wanted, but it's what we are now. And that's going to have to be enough." Some of them nodded, some looked away. One, a fresh prisoner with corporal stripes, spat at my feet. "Traitor," he hissed. "Emperor damned traitor." I looked at him. This young man who still believed in rescue and duty and the righteousness of suffering. I'd been him. I remembered being him, and looking at him now was like looking at a child who still believed in fairy tales, innocent and doomed, and so tragically unaware of how the world actually worked. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just someone who wanted to live. You'll figure out which soon enough." That night, I didn't sleep in the pen. They gave me quarters in a shed, crude but shelter, with a blanket that almost fit, and a ration that was only half rotten. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the camp, orcs fighting and laughing, machines grinding, the distant howl of wind across the alkaline wastes, and I waited to feel something. Guilt, perhaps. Horror at what I'd become. Grief for the man I'd been. Something human. Nothing came. Just tiredness, and the satisfaction of a full belly, and the knowledge that tomorrow I'd wake up and do my job and probably survive another day. That was all. That was everything. Somewhere in the darkness, in whatever part of me still remembered prayers, a voice whispered, "Emperor, forgive me. But even that voice was fading, growing distant, being drowned out by the simpler rhythms of orcish existence. Work, eat, sleep, survive, lead, be useful, be strong, be accepted. The WAAGH didn't care about my soul. It cared about function, and function, I'd learned, was enough. Function kept you alive. Function gave you purpose. Function meant you mattered, even if what you mattered to were Xenos monsters who'd destroyed everything you'd once valued. I closed my eyes, slept, dreamed of nothing, and when morning came, I woke up as Hume boss, got to work organizing my gits, and didn't waste a single moment thinking about Corporal Hectorus, service number 447, Theta 9271, Colvax 88th Infantry Regiment. He was dead, had been for months. I was what remained, and I was good at my job.